Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. I am quite excited today because this is a special edition. It's about the King of Pop, Michael Jackson. How could I not do this, right? I watched the Michael biopic last week and it was amazing. And I personally grew up with Michael's music in the 80s and 90s, also in the 2000s. And, when he passed away, it was quite a shock for all of us. And I think still is today. And I have been really fascinated by stories. And I also think that sometimes we judge people very, very quickly, especially when they're quite successful, and we just blindly listen to what the media is saying without even knowing anything about them. And I personally did not know Michael Jackson. So I find that an autobiography or this biopic it's really helpful to show us some more depth about a human. And then, of course, I went into a little bit of a rabbit hole this past week and I watched a lot of little videos about Michael Jackson, like original clips where he was much younger and all the things that he did. And, that's the stuff that the media often doesn't show you, like all the good stuff. And I was like, I have to look at his human design. And I have, I think, many years ago. But now that I have been really deep into the world of both tropical and true sidereal human design, I feel really called for the first time to look at a celebrity and look at both charts. It's really showing you that you can work with both, and both will give you insights that are quite amazing in how we can better understand a person. And the way that I like to explain it, which I find is most resonant to people, is that your tropical chart is a little bit like your south node energy. That's something that's more familiar to you that may also keep you a little bit stuck in your comfort zone. And then your true sidereal is what you're meant to really grow into, gets you out of your comfort zone. It's all about expansion and like your bigger purpose and visions in this lifetime. Another way is also like tropical and true sidereal are a little bit like if you were looking at an object, one is looking at this object like this, and the other one is looking at it from a slightly different perspective, right? And the true sidereal for me is the most straight view because it's really what's straight up in the sky. But I also find that the tropical is super relevant. Another thing that really caught my attention when I was watching the biopic about Michael Jackson that really connected to my own life so much is that I learned in conjunction with some research I did about him later that he grew up with the Jehovah Witness. So they never celebrated Christmas or his birthday. And I think it was Liz Taylor later on that actually, when he was already an adult, that celebrated or invited him for the first Christmas ever. And I think later he left Jehovah Witnesses and he was very much about, following Jesus and praying, and he apparently read the Bible a lot. And also, I feel like he was loving everybody, right? It was not about where you're from, what you believe in. He had this like overall exuding love within him. And I also, when I was growing up for several years, we were following Jehovah Witness, and I experienced how it is when you don't celebrate certain holidays. And that also didn't resonate with me. And since I was a child, I had this idea within me that, well, can we just all be loving with one another? I don't care what you believe in, as long as we treat one another with love and respect and kindness. And that's what I see in Michael Jackson so much, because this man had so much love and kindness within him that he was literally spreading all over the world and especially to the children. So, with that, because I could go on and on, I'm going to pull up some slides. We're going to look now at Michael Jackson's human design, like I said, from both the tropical and the true sidereal. Okay, the overall theme here is being different because human design is also called the science of differentiation. And I often find that the teachings of human design miss this because we generalize so many things. And we are all here to be different, right? We are all here to stand out. And I think Michael Jackson was an extremely beautiful example of what it means to be different, but also what it comes with, right? Because when you are different, there are two things that happen. You become extremely polarizing, like it was in Michael's case. Obviously, he was so famous, like I think we cannot compare with any other celebrity or musician out there. And at the same time, when you are so different, you also become the target of criticism, of judgment, and being the scapegoat for everything. And I think he experienced this quite a lot during his lifetime. So, with that, let's now look at his human design. And we're going to first start with the tropical that I really see as the foundation. And this is probably what most of you have heard about Michael's human design because the tropical is just much more popular out there. And then after that, we will move into the True Sidereal. Awesome. So now here we have his tropical human design chart. And as you can see, we're using the birth time of August 29, 1958 at 7:33 p.m. in Gary, Indiana. That's to the best of my knowledge, what was available online, also what they have on Genetic Matrix. And here he is a 1-3 emotional projector. I'm actually gonna probably use my pen a little bit. So the 1-3 profile, that is a profile that is very introverted. It's very much about the person itself because the one line is called the investigator, needs a lot of alone time, loves to study. And from what I know, Michael was reading a lot of books and he liked his alone time. On top of it, his conscious sun here is gate 40. And this gate often is referenced as the gate of aloneness, but it's also about, finding this balance between being alone and then being with people. And this is also part of this one channel he has, which is the 3740 channel. And this channel is all about family and community. And it's quite interesting because this energy kind of reminds me of how he was growing up. He was obviously growing up in a very big family, lots of siblings, and he became part of the Jackson Fives very, very early when I think he was 6 or 7 years old. And so that's how it all started, right? With community and the family. But also because the 37 is here, the conscious earth for him, this can often be quite of a challenge. And he did also have quite some challenges in the context of his family, right? Because I think he wanted to be friends with everybody and he loved kindness and harmony. And the way that he grew up it was a little bit strict, right? There was a lot of pressure, so that wasn't always the case for him. But I think it beautifully displays this energy. This is also a emotional wave, meaning that he may have experienced on a consistent basis emotions that were kind of building up with him, slowly over time, and then he needed ways to express them. And I think often as kids, we don't really learn this. And this could be also something that he might have struggled with to express his emotions, especially as he was growing up with a very strict father and he was really being disciplined a lot and all of that. But overall, this is really, I think, highlighting his need for alone time. He was a very shy guy also when you saw him in public, right? He always was wearing his like sunglasses and it was sometimes really hard for him to take it off. And you could see how he had a hard time having so much eyes on him. So he was really comfortable and also hiding while he had so much visibility and exposure, of course. And then the unconscious sun is gate 16. So this is all part of his incarnation cross, the cross of planning. And this energy is so beautiful for him, I find. And the unconscious sun has a lot to do with your well-being in a sense. It's like the sun of your body, of your physical, emotional, and mental body. And gate 16, which comes off your throat center, is all about versatility. It's about also enthusiasm. And I think, I mean, it's coming off the throat center, right? Like all the different things that you are, you bring it together and it becomes this beautiful song at the end of the day. Michael Jackson was so many things, right? And he created so many different pieces of music. And I think he really allowed himself to be everything that he was without compromise. And it's in the three line, it's all about experimenting. And then the unconscious earth, gate 9, this is all about focus. It comes off the sacral center. And I think he was a very, very focused guy, right? He like knew what he wanted. And we're gonna also talk a little bit more about manifestation and everything because they talk about it in the video. But it's like, well, you don't get so easily distracted because there's so many different things that you can do, but he was really hyper focused. And he also has gate 29 double defined, which is about devotion. He has this in his Mercury and also in his Pluto. And this again is an energy where you're like, it's like an Olympic athlete. You are so devoted to your craft. And I think, at least from what I saw online, that he even inspired people like Kobe Bryant, that was already at the time that he was alive, such a brilliant and committed athlete because of his routines and his dedication to become better. And he was deeply inspired by Michael Jackson because Michael Jackson apparently practiced and practiced and practiced until his feet were hurting. Now, there's also a shadow to this, right? Where you overdo it, and maybe he fell into this. I think it's easy for all of us. But yeah, and then he's a projector in this chart. And when most people see this chart, and I think there's another version with a different birth time where he's actually a reflector, and oftentimes people say, yeah, that's very much on point with man in the mirror because the reflector, we often talk about the reflection piece. And here in this chart, he still has 7 centers undefined. And anytime we have a lot of undefined centers in a chart, that is really an indication that there's a lot of sensitivity, right? Because you can take on so many energies and you don't even know what is yours, and it can feel very overwhelming. And oftentimes, when people have a lot of undefined centers, they just need more alone time. So, again, there's this theme of alone time. Now, another gate that stands out, or actually, it's 2 gates together. So, we have gate 3, which he has defined twice in his chart in his Venus unconscious and also unconscious south node. And then the programming partner, which is basically like an opposition in astrology. So these are really working together quite a bit. That's why his north node is gate 50. And also his unconscious moon is gate 50. And he also has gate 50 in his conscious Jupiter. We'll talk more about this when we also look at his tropical gene keys. But what I want to just point out right now about gate 3 is that this energy here comes off the sacral center. And this energy is actually a lot about innocence. It's about being like a child. And especially when there's chaos, right? This is this energy of like, when there's chaos, you don't take things so seriously. And you, as you keep responding to things that really light you up, where you're more in your childlike, innocent essence, you create order and you actually create innovation. And I think if Michael Jackson did one thing, he was quite innovative with his music, right? And what he brought to the world. So while we have gate 3 just 2 times in the chart, because gate 50 is also defined once and twice. I think it's 2 or 3 times, yeah. So in a way, because it's the programming partner, it's the opposing energy, it's like a coin, so to say. That's what I call genius coins. It's actually 5 times in this child. So gate 3, this innocent child, and we all know that Michael Jackson had a Peter Pan syndrome in some way, and he actually openly talked about it, where he was like saying, like, yeah, no, but I am like Peter Pan in my heart. And he had this essence about himself of staying like a child. This is also why I think at some point he said that, a lot of people live their adulthood based on, their childhood, but I'm living my life based on not having a childhood because he so early on had to take on so many responsibilities, which is also actually a theme of Gate 50. Gate 50, that is that programming partner of Gate 3, in the shadow is that fear of responsibility, right? And he, as a child, probably had way too many responsibilities. He kind of like was responsible for the like bringing money in for the whole family, right? Obviously, the responsibility was also on the parents and everything, but he, as a kid, being seen as so talented, I can only imagine how crazy stressful this must have been for him. Now, I want to look at his chart again, and now in conjunction with his tropical astrology chart. And I think this is something that we can all agree on. Like, this is like so on point. Okay, so we can see that his sun is in Virgo. And then he also has Pluto in Virgo, which I can imagine that can feel a little bit hard having Pluto, which is a generational theme about rebirth. And then he has this stellium in Leo, and it's all in the sixth house, right? So we all know, and Michael Jackson talks about this over and over again himself, that he was never satisfied. He was always a perfectionist and everything had to be better, right? So he wasn't hiding that part of him. But also, part of this perfectionist made him the genius and artist that he was, right? And the amazing pieces and dance moves that we all have seen, I think, from nobody else in that excellence. And it's in the sixth house, right? So I think, I don't know if I've ever seen a chart that is so lit up in the sixth house. And the sixth house is about routines, it's about discipline. Because the sixth house is very much also related to Virgo energy, right? It's about your work, it's about also your health and your well-being. And I think that's also really highlighting again his natural inclination to do all the repetitions and keep doing the routines no matter what it takes. Then the other thing that obviously a lot of energy in Leo as well, because Leo is about being in the spotlight. And again, we all know how much he was in the spotlight and maybe even too much for his shy nature at the same time. And the other thing that is quite interesting, he was also born under a full moon. So when we have the sun exactly the opposite in the sky, then we have a full moon. So when he was born, there was a full moon. And we also know, right? He created the moonwalk. We can say that has to do with this. And overall, when somebody was born under a full moon, it's a life of high visibility. And it's almost like you're larger than life itself. And I think that's definitely the case for him. And another thing, his Chiron is in Aquarius in the 12th house. And when I was looking this up, because I mainly focus on the human design parts, obviously, but I like to bring in a couple of elements of astrology. So when Chiron is in the 12th house in Aquarius, oftentimes people may feel a little bit like an outsider. They may have hidden fears. They may have social anxiety or also struggle with feeling belonging. And I think especially the social anxiety is something that I can see in Michael Jackson. Also, I think when you're such a popular pop star where you are in the spotlight, right? Like with a full moon and so much Leo energy in your chart, then yeah, you have to often probably pretend that it's cool for you, but I think this can be a lot, especially also when you're such a highly sensitive being, right? That he often talked about that he definitely was. So, and also 12th house, that is your spiritual connection to God, source, universe, to the divine realm. And from what I know also is that this is something that he really had since early on as a child. He was very interested in yeah, spiritual teachings. He read many books, and like I was mentioning earlier, he read the Bible a lot. And I think also then growing up with Jehovah Witnesses, maybe this was a challenge for him growing up, right? Also in the context of, his family and the community and being such a popular person already early on in his life. Now, Next, I am going to look at the gene keys because they also tell us so much about the energies that we so often saw in Michael Jackson. So here we have both the human design chart and the gene keys, and I'm going to show you how this is connected. So we already went over his incarnation cross earlier, right? We looked at gate 40, 37, 16, and 9, and this is now also what you see in the gene keys. This is basically the same as the conscious sun here, and then the evolution is the earth, and then the radiance is the unconscious sun, and the purpose gene key is the unconscious earth. So this one here, I talked about in human design, gate 40 is a lot about alone time and also balancing your innate need to be with people and also to be alone, and also between doing and resting, right? And I think he could overdo it from what we know, where he was sometimes practicing a lot and maybe too much, but that's what also what was meant to be for him at the same time. Now, in the context of the gene keys, they go a little bit deeper into these 64 archetypal energies. The 40 is probably one of my favorite. This energy talks about in the shadow is about exhaustion, right? How you push against everything, you're trying to force your will onto everything because this gate comes off the will center, right? Here we have gate 40. And this in the higher expression, where I think he really was early on in his life, he tapped into resolve and divine will. And resolve is about when you are really being guided from your heart. And the resolve in the Gene Keys talks about the art of doing nothing. And this doesn't mean not doing anything, right? This rather means not doing anything outside of your zone of genius. That's really what it's referring to. Where you're doing the thing that you are naturally gifted to do, this natural talent you have. Obviously, Michael Jackson shared this with all of us. I'm so grateful for that. And he let this higher consciousness of, call it the divine, I call it God, flow through him. So he was a vessel for it. In many of the clips that I saw, he actually talks about this. And in the biopic, there's a cool scene where he's like on the pool and he's in a meditative state, floating on the water on a blow up mattress. And they were asking him, like, Michael, what are you doing? And he was like, well, I think I'm letting the divine inspiration come through me because otherwise Prince is gonna get it, right? And there are sources where he often mentioned that he would get up at 3 a.m. in the morning. He couldn't sleep. He had this divine inspiration and he would get into the recording studio. People were coming that were part of his team to create the recordings because he had it come through in this moment. And he knew that is this coming through now and I have to act on it. If I don't, then Prince or some other musician will act on this. So there's another book, The Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert is a book where she talks about this in a similar way, where she had this idea to write a book and she didn't take action on it. And then a year later, she saw the freaking book that she had the idea about on a shelf, but written by somebody else. And this made her realize I'm not the only one getting these ideas, right? This is why I'm really big on like nobody owns anything, right? Michael Jackson, he had the courage to act upon it, to record the stuff and get it out there right away, rather than waiting or, procrastinating and so forth. So this embodiment of the 40th gene key, I see this so much in Michael Jackson. And then it's in line one, which also couldn't be more important. It's the creator, right? This is the originality. Like it's about confidence. It's about where things start and you create something completely new. And I think he definitely created it. But also at the same time, don't forget that even though it was unique, it was new, it was original, all of his work was inspired also by other people that he admired, like James Brown. He watched these people over and over and over and over again, and also the dance movements. And this is also why what you are doing today, it's unique, but it's also based on what has already been there, and you have been inspired by this, right? So again, couldn't be any more on point. Now, the other thing that I also find really on point is the three line in the unconscious, right, which we have here. And also here, this is why we have 16.3 and 9.3 in the purpose. So the radiance, I already talked about a little bit about the versatility piece, right? And you become masterful. That is really what happens. And I mean, if Michael Jackson wasn't a master, then who was? I mean, he was incredibly masterful. And it's in the line three. So line three is all about being the life of the party, right? It's like doing the moves, and it's like you can see here in the purpose, it's about movement. It's related to blood. And it's interesting, right? He also has a song, something with blood on the dance floor, and movement obviously is Michael Jackson is movement, right? And this is about the physical body. Who is he being? And also you see here in the ninth gene key, it's about determination. It's about invincibility, right? And the shadow's inertia. Inertia is where you're not moving, but he was constantly moving. So I think he was very, very much in the higher expression of all of this. Now, there are many other things that are also very much Michael Jackson. So here, this is really cool. You can see I talked about this already in the tropical, in the human design chart. This gate 50 and 3. So these two gates, oh, in the gene keys, actually, they are called programming partners because they are working together. It's like an opposition in astrology, like I explained earlier. And so in his attraction sphere, he has this gate 50. And this has a lot to do with the people he attracts in his life, right? And I think he was always all about creating harmony and creating more peace and equilibrium in the world. And also, there's this theme in the shadow, the fear of responsibility. And this guy, like, oh my God, he had so much responsibility, right? And also in the shadow, there's a lot of corruption. And I think he also experienced a lot of corruption that was pointed actually also against him. And this happened in line four. So line four is all about his close network and friends. And I don't want to get too much into the allegations towards him, but I think a lot of these things came from the four line network, people that used to be actually close friends, and he even considered as part of the family, and then this later on started to accuse him of things. So I find this interesting. And then his SQ. So your SQ is your unconscious Venus. So same, 3.2. And as you can see in the gene keys, this is like the heart of it. It's the center of your gene keys profile. And now as you can see, it's innocence, right? And I don't know how this can be more important for Michael Jackson, but that's what he talked so much about. And then the innovation. And this is all about this childlike energy. If you really study the third gene key, it talks a lot about it. And line two, this is the effortless dancer, basically, in the gene keys. It's about the freedom to be yourself, to tap into this effortlessness and ease, this natural genius that was gifted to you. And I think he was so much of that, right? And then also the pearl, which has a lot to do with how he perceived prosperity, not really from the context of money, so to say. But again, he had this need to create harmony and equilibrium in the world. And I think his humanitarian work, especially with children, right, where he was really treating everybody the same, especially kids that were neglected. He kept visiting them in hospitals, and he was donating money everywhere and all these charities. So I think that's, yeah, really who he was. Then also his vocation, this had a lot to do also with the work he was doing. Escape 36, right? This comes off the emotional solar plexus here. That's his unconscious Mars in the human design chart. And this is about humanity, what it means to be human, right? And it's about compassion. And again, I think he was such a role model of really, really embracing that. So this is what I have for tropical. There's probably more, but now let's look at the true sidereal human design of Michael Jackson, which I call the expansion. And also to show you, how both tropical and true sidereal can reveal and show so much about a person. So here we now have his true sidereal human design chart. And as you can see, it's quite different. He is now a 4-6 generator, and he has four centers defined. He still has a lot of undefined centers that, again, like was explaining earlier, can have also a lot to do with his sensitivity for things. And for this one now, I'm actually going to go straight to the overview where you also see the astrology chart next to it. So here now, we again have the undefined throat center. I didn't talk about this with a tropical, but an undefined throat center in general, this is where we can become very, very wise. And I think his voice had so many facets, right? When we have an undefined center, there is much more variability in the voice. And I think we could really experience this with all of his music that we got to listen to. And previously we had gate 40 and his conscious sun, right? And now this is no longer here now in True Sidereal. His conscious sun is gate 31. And this gate actually comes off the throat center, right? It's a voice gate in itself. And this energy is all about leadership. I will talk a little bit more about this when we look at the gene keys. And overall, what's important to know is that this is about humility in leadership. It's about democratic leadership, right? Where he doesn't need to be the leader, he's more chosen to be the leader. And I think that's also what we saw a lot with Michael Jackson. Then his conscious earth is gate 41, which is right down here at the root center. And this is all about imagination. And I think we can all agree that he was a very imaginative person, like with all his childlike demeanor and Neverland and Peter Pan. And I think also all of his songs that he wrote, right? There was so much imagination that went into everything. When he created the Thriller movie, it was the first time, I think, where a piece of music was created like a short movie. It was so unique, it was so new. And I think you have to have a lot of imagination for this. And with all of it, he was that perfectionist. And now, if we look at his astrology next to this, what has shifted now, he's no longer a Virgo in his conscious sun. Rather, now he becomes all Leo, right? His sun is in Leo, and then everything else that previously, I think Uranus is quite at the cusp from Cancer to Leo, but everything else here is right in Leo, all in the sixth house. And again, it's so important for Michael Jackson, right? And now we could see like, whoa, well, but now he no longer has any Virgo, but no, yes, he does. His North Node is actually in Virgo, right? So he actually was meant to become masterful, perfectionist in that sense, right? But I think this happened already early on in life. It was probably more easier for him to move into this early on in life because he has a lot of Virgo energy also through the sixth house, right? Because sixth house really is, that's the house for Virgo. So everything here in Leo, it was just like, dude, you're here to be in the spotlight, right? Like your creativity, like you're here to be seen and all of it. It's about self-expression. And oh my God, how much did he do this? So this is like the pure embodiment of Michael Jackson. And then again, we have this full moon still. But now it is a full moon in Aquarius. So what's interesting here is this is quite a theme of prioritizing humanitarian causes. And it's about collective groups. And I think Michael Jackson was so much about humanitarian causes, right? He was also like quite a socially active rebel. He did things that I didn't know about until I did more research on him. So he was recording the music video for They Don't Care About Us, apparently in the favelas of Brazil. And from what I understand is that the government of Brazil didn't want him to do it. But he actually paid the gangs in the favelas and he put it on. He put it on with the people. and they all danced along with him. I also think that for one of his music videos, I think it was Bad or Thrill, I don't know exactly which one it was. He used some of his own money because I wouldn't pay for it, and he also paid some of the gangs in the city, right, to support him, and they danced together. So he was so non-judgmental, and I think he saw the love and good in everyone. And there was a huge theme, I feel like, forgiveness in everything that he did. Because, we're people, we do things that are not amazing, but he was always like, well, let me see the good in people, let me support them, let's all come together as a collective, as a group, and spread more love, spread more compassion through my music, right? So that is something that really stands out for me. And yeah, and then his south node here is in Pisces, which I also think highlights a lot of his like connection to the spiritual realm, to God and everything. And then the other thing that really talks to me in this chart is that his midheaven, 10th house, right, which is all about his public life, his career, is in the freaking heart of Ophiuchus. Just take that in. So Ophiuchus is a serpent bearer. This is all about healing. And then here at GC, this is basically the galactic center, so very close. And this is what we say in True Sidereal astrology. Like this is really like, where we connect to God. And I think that he was really a messenger of so many of the messages that, were already written in the Bible. And like I said, he often talked about how he was imitating a lot of the teachings of Jesus, right? Through being very loving and kind, and especially, and he said it like, I'm meant to be like children and protect children and love children. And I think that was his entire life was about that. And of course, we know he was widely misunderstood for it, and also it got him into a lot of trouble and accusations later on. But this is something that, when I saw it in his chart, I was like, wow, this is quite magical. The other thing now in his human design chart, he has the channel 5125 defined. And this channel is really through awakening, through shock, through disruption, through agitation in some way, bring us closer to spirit. Gate 25 is all about spirit, about the divine. This is connecting the two heart centers. I mean, this is called the will center and this is called the G center, but before these two centers split into two, it's basically the heart chakra in itself, right? So I feel like he created a lot of music. And if you now listen to his lyrics, which I have to say, when I was younger, I never really listened so closely to the lyrics. It's quite shocking what you already knew and what you put out there, and he just said it, right? And now we're listening to it, and it's like, oh wow, this is quite interesting. And it's now, I feel like, also collectively leading to so much awakening and uniting people, and also bringing them closer to, yeah, universal love in that way. The only other channel he had in this chart being a generator, and also, before he was a projector and now he's a generator, and people are often like, yeah, but how can this work? And the way this works for me is like the foundation being a projector is about what is the big invitation, right? And he was obviously by life invited to be on stages and be a singer. He was invited by his family, if it was in the right ways or not, but he was invited by the entire world to be on stage, right? Because the invitations by projectors is about the big invitations of life that you're not looking for. And I think he fully embraced this. Now, the generator archetype, which I also think was there the entire life, was about responding to things that light you up. And when you do what lights you up, you're a freaking bundle of energy and you keep going and going and going and going. And he obviously did, right? He was dancing and dancing and dancing and dancing and practicing, right? He was literally like on fire and he kept going because he loved it so much. So I can see both the projector archetype and the generator archetype in him very, very much, right? We cannot see those things as separate things ever. And this channel here, the 5342, is about starting things and ending things, right? And this is always what reminds me of cycles in life, where before you start something, you most likely have to finish something first. And I think for him, one very big thing that I remember from the biopic is that, he was part of the Jackson Fives, and I think he stayed longer due to, wanting to please the family and kind of fit his role and be responsible and all of it, right? And keep the peace. He stayed very long. And I think that's when the biopic actually ends, when he on stage was everybody telling like, this is my last song. And I think it was a little bit upsetting to the father because he had already planned other things. But it was his truth, right? So he left and then he started his own solo career as Michael Jackson and no longer being part of the Jackson Fives. And I think even later on, he still went back there. But he was already such a solo star while he was still performing with the Jackson Fives. That's also something that I didn't quite know. But he had to bring this to completion at some point, right? And there was also the incident with the Pepsi commercial, which I think that was a very tragic moment for Michael Jackson that I think so many underestimate, where he had to go through so much pain. I mean, his whole scalp was on fire. And from what I understand, he was really lucky to survive it. And I think that's when he also started to take pain medications. And I think we just have no idea how that ever impacted him. It was a pretty big burn. And maybe that was also one of the things that made him realize, like, I have to do what's right for me. And so he eventually, yeah, went to fully embrace his own solo career, right? And I think he probably had many times in his life where he went through kind of rebirth cycles in some way. Also, his North Node is in the eighth house, his South Node is in the second. So there also it's a big theme of rebirth in his life, right? And also with the relationships, he had two different marriages and his music themes and everything. And again, I don't know everything about him, but from what I saw and learned about him, was like, yeah, very much a life of, constant rebirth. And obviously, there was also a lot of shared resources, like with money and music labels and all these things. And then, his Jupiter, which is all about prosperity, is also part of Virgo, which is again this perfectionism energy, becoming masterful at something through his daily routines. Now, this part of fear, the incarnation course, I'm going to explain this more through the lens of the gene keys on the next slide. One thing that I want to point out here is gate 46. You can see that he has gate 46 in his chart, not just once, and this is his north node in his unconscious, but two times his unconscious moon, and then three times in his unconscious Neptune and also his conscious Neptune. So we have this gate four times in his chart, right? So this becomes a theme in his chart. And gate 46 is the love of the body. And also in the gene keys, when we look at the gene keys, you will see this. This is also, again, about this more childlike nature, because the shadow is seriousness. And the higher frequency is delight, and then it's ecstasy. And again, bringing in this energy of a child. And previously, we had it through the energy of gate 3 in the tropical chart, which we no longer have defined here, but now it's so dominant through the energy of gate 46. And this energy is also part of the body, in the sense that I think I was talking earlier about gate 29. He doesn't have it defined here. But this is actually his split in the chart, which we may struggle with. So this is a devotion and commitment. And we can sometimes overdo it and then deform the physical body, right? So I think he could have maybe fallen into the practice of, doing too much and, exhausting his body quite a bit. But what we really saw with this gate 46 a lot for him is that he was in such an energy of delight and ecstasy when he was dancing, right? So this is again something that I think is so incredibly on point for him. And it's also, that's part of his North Node energy. And the South Node is that gate 25. So this is something, I think this connection to spirit and the divine is something that just came quite naturally to him. And then he also has in his conscious moon, he has gate 13, which is all about storytelling, which I think, many of his songs, I think Billie Jean, for example, like he was telling a story of somebody's girlfriend of a guy that he knew, and he made this like freaking incredible song about it, right? And then his Mercury, which is all about his communication, we have gate 62. Gate 62 is very much about precision and details. And in the context of the gene keys, it's really saying that pure intelligence always comes from the heart. It doesn't come from the mind. And I also think that everything Michael said and the songs he wrote and shared with the world was all about pure from the heart, right? And then unconscious Mercury, gate 51. That's a little bit more provocative. That's a little bit more agitating, but leading to awakening. So this could be sometimes where his lyrics were very shocking and like he was calling out things, you know? And he also has gate 39, which is this Uranus, which is also it's a more provocative nature. So I also wonder a little bit, that, even people just love Michael Jackson. A lot of people also maybe felt threatened by him and they were really provoked by him because he was so shockingly honest about so many things. All right, so now we have the same human design chart again, and now we have the gene keys here. So we already saw the 31 is his life's work, the 41 is his earth evolution, and the 31 is a leadership energy, as you can see, right? And it's about humility. Again, this is something I couldn't see so much in Michael Jackson. And also now we have the line 4. He's a 4-6 profile, right? And when we talk about the 4 line in your life's work, or also your brand, it's really about selling through love, through human stories. And I think he was a master magician at doing this, right? And also, again, with the 41, is this, it's about imagination, anticipation. We can get also lost a little bit in fantasy. And I think maybe that happened a little bit with the Peter Pan life that he was living, right? So maybe, but he needed that for himself, and it was an ongoing challenge for him. But also, he needed it in the foreline, the love and the community that he created for himself, with the people that he invited there. And then another thing, the unconscious side of his incarnation cross. So we have the 27th gene key is his unconscious sun, which is called the radiance in the gene keys. This has a lot to do with your well-being. And again, something that I can see so much in Michael Jackson, it's all about selflessness, right? He was really so caring with other people, especially children, and especially children that were sick, that were neglected. And in his free time, he would always go there and support them and cheer them up and, create a better life for them. And I mean, also his songs. I mean, he was like Heal the World. He wrote the song also with Lionel Richie that became iconic in the world. It's all about changing the world through being a better human and being caring, being kind. So it's all about altruism and selflessness, right? And the shadow of this can be that we kind of sometimes neglect our own needs, right? So maybe that's something he, sometimes it was too much about other people and he didn't really take care of what he needed and all of that. And line 6 is also, it's a very philanthropic energy where it's who you're being as a role model, right? You teach through who you are being. And then his purpose, again, I think this is so important. 28, we call it the gate of struggle in human design, but it's also about embracing the adventure and the totality of life. That's why the gift is called in the Gene Keys totality, which is mean like embracing all of it, right? The good and the bad and seeing everything of life and our fears, And the shadow is purposelessness, right? When we don't really see that we have a purpose in life. And I think also he was really living in the higher expression of embracing the totality of life. And I think he made himself quite immortal, right? He will forever live on in our hearts through his music, through his words and the artistry he put out into the world. And it's again in the sixth line. The sixth line, like I said, is this role model, is this energy that is seeing like further and than anybody else, sees kind of the big picture of where things are going. And it's a very philanthropic energy. Now, I was talking about this gate 46 earlier that he has 4 times defined in the human design chart, and you can see this here because it's his unconscious moon, that this is the attraction sphere in his true sidereal chart. And again, it's about this delight and this ecstasy, being more in this childlike energy of who he was. And then the center of his gene keys is the SQ, the 36.5. We already saw this in his tropical chart. I think it was in his vocation here, and it's about the humanity and compassion. Again, really energies that I think he was so much embodying. And the other thing now, his vocation in the true sidereal is the gate 49 or the 49th gene key in line 5. Line 5 is, again, a lot of responsibility. It's about, I think he was really great at managing things. Even when he was recording his videos, he was always directing people and how to sing and how to dance together. He was just a incredible visionary leader. That's really what the 5 line is so much about. And gate 49 is a challenging energy. It's a very emotional energy. It can be quite reactive. But in the higher expression is when we are no longer a victim to our emotions. We're no longer reacting. And I think that was really challenging for Michael because also of how many things he was accused of. And you see this sometimes in interviews when journalists get at him and they keep asking these super inappropriate questions. And he was really answering in a very calm way. And I think he totally brought about a revolution and a rebirth in society through his being and his acts of service. And then his culture has a lot to do with financial prosperity. And here he has the 47th, which is this gate here in the human design chart, which is also his conscious north node. And it's his unconscious Jupiter. So gate 47, we call this the mindset gate in human design. And I didn't know this about Michael Jackson until I saw the biopic, but he was having these affirmations. He was writing down like he's going to have the best-selling album ever with Thriller, and it all happened. And one thing that's really important I want to say is that this has to come, the initial motivation for this, I believe, has to come from your heart. Like he was meant to create it, but he had the mental discipline also to keep rehearsing this, to keep saying and writing this affirmation and having the mindset to focus on that. And that in conjunction with his Virgo North Node and all Leo and the discipline, everything in the sixth house, right? He really opened up the floodgates of prosperity. And then in the line 5, so we tend to say that you have to become kind of a leader of a network, right? And it's about making huge impact in society, which obviously Michael Jackson did more than any other musician ever, I think. And the piece that I want to finish with is his pearl. So this pearl here is the sixth gene key. And the sixth gene key comes off the emotional solar plexus here. And this energy, just similar to the 50 we had in the tropical chart, he has it undefined here. But here he has this gate 6 defined, and this energy, as you can hear, read, it's about peace. And he definitely wanted to create world peace, right? It was about diplomacy, and the shadow is conflict, right? So for him, creating peace in the world, that's what made him feel prosperous. And I think that was really the higher expansion he was here to create. And it's in the line six. For the line six, money is not really, doesn't matter. It's not for your own selfish needs so much. It's more about creating that peace in the world, right? The sixth line is more about envisioning a world where we no longer need money. And he was supporting so many humanitarian causes, from what I understand. He actually, so when the Pepsi incident happened, when, he was the victim, he got burned. I think he received a lot of money, obviously, from Pepsi, and he donated the full amount of money to, I think, the hospital he was probably treated at, for burn, because there were other people that were more severely burned than him. So he wasn't like, oh, now I'm getting all this money because I got hurt. He was like, no, now I'm going to use the money to give it away. And he kind of did this also more quietly because these were all things that I didn't really know. And I think at some point he had a world record in the Guinness Book of how many, humanitarian causes he was involved in, and he gave money away for that, right? Also, I think the Neverland Ranch and all the money invested there, that was also to support so many kids and children in the world. So, yeah. And I mean, lastly, 53, it's called superabundance and the brilliant mind, also all terms that I think are super descriptive of the embodiment of Michael Jackson. And I just have to say that I'm really amazed by how accurate these energies bring out who we know he was. I mean, to the best of, what I know from what people have been telling the stories about him, right? And my vocation and my true sidereal chart is gate 33, is this one. And this is about retelling stories very much, right? And I love to retell stories. And it's all about retelling stories in an empowering way, right? Because we can always be a victim of a story, or we can see kind of the good in a story and, bring to light what it was really about and how it can serve humanity. So it's also about teaching through storytelling, right? And with that, I want to thank you for sticking around for so long. And I hope this really inspired you how, you can work with both charts. And I find that both charts, the tropical and the true sidereal, have very similar themes, but they highlight different points and aspects of his life that really work together. It's really like you're just looking at it from a slightly different perspective, but I really believe he was all of it, you know? And I also want to say that and invite you, right? Allow yourself to be different because all of what Michael Jackson was because that's what naturally came to him, and he gave himself radical permission to be that, to be this vessel of the divine will to flow through him, so he could step into this um leadership based in humility and really being a server to the world and spreading compassion and kindness and bringing about a revolution so there can be more peace in the world. And I hope this inspires you to be different. You're meant to be different, right? And I know that's so hard for many of us because we can see with Michael Jackson, it's polarizing, it attracts a lot of people, but it also calls in a lot of enemies and a lot of criticism, you know? And oftentimes we keep hiding our natural genius and gifts and talents because we are afraid of both in some way, because we know that a lot of visibility, a lot of magnetism comes also naturally with having haters and having people that criticize you left and right, you know? But I think the work is to stay true to who you are. That is who God made you to be, right? And I think that's our biggest purpose for all of us, to fully do that without letting these fears hold us back. And I also hope this yeah, was informative for you to kind of see who I interpret who Michael Jackson was, and he still is. He still inspires me today. And also, if you go online, I mean, there's so many beautiful quotes that he wrote, which is like this wisdom we now see from often like ancient teachers and just a very, very, very wise man that I'm very thankful for to have been witnessing, his greatness and also the challenges he has gone through and how he has or how he used to manage it throughout his lifetime. And yeah, that he will continue to live on forever in our hearts. So thank you, Michael Jackson. I love you. Thank you all for listening. I love you too. And I'm excited to be back with you all on the next episode. Bye, everyone.